Good morning, students of class 10. Welcome back to the online classes now. We'll continue our history lesson, the making of a global world. So we are coming to the last portion of that chapter. Since it is a very long chapter, we had to do part by part and it took a long time. So anyway, we have come to the last point, last part. So we'll continue the lesson. In our previous class, we have talked about the developing countries. Since the list of the developing countries were very long, they turned towards the international institutions, that International Monetary Fund and Bretton Woods. They turned towards them for loan. Since the list was very long, they had to wait. And since they had to wait for a long time, it took months for them to obtain the loan from these institutions. Actually, these institutions were not made for the developing countries. It was made for the industrial Western world. Since then, but still the developing countries turned towards them for providing loan. What happened after that? I've written 7 points over here. Number 1, the developing countries were forced to borrow. They were forced to borrow because they had to wait. They were forced to borrow from Western commercial banks and private lending institutions. So they could not wait any longer. So they were forced to turn towards private institutions, private lending institutions and Western commercial banks. So what happened? They got the money, but this led to periodic debt. They fell into debt traps. Sometimes they could not pay in time. Debt crisis, they faced this type of problems in developing countries. Debt crisis, they could not pay their loan in time, so the interest of the loan increased such an extent that they find it very difficult to repay. So there were commercial banks, private institutions. So naturally, debt crisis in developing countries, lower income and poverty. The developing countries, they face these problems. Debt crisis, lower income, poverty, especially Africa and Latin America. Especially these Africa and Latin America. The developing countries, they face this type of crisis or problems. Number 3, from 1970s, MNC. If anyone asks you what is the meaning of MNC, immediately you must answer multinational companies. Multinational companies also, they invest money in developing countries to set up factories, industries and produce and sell for the world market. So from 1970s, MNCs, they are huge capitalists. They are industrialists having huge amount of capital. So multinational company also began to shift. Shift means change their attention. Shift production, attention and production operations to low wage Asian countries, especially China. In China, the laborers, they receive very little amount of wages. The cost of production is very low because the wages were low in China. Huge population they had. They were unemployed, so they were ready to work under very little wages. So the cost of production was very low. That's why it became a very attractive destination for the multinational companies. So you can see that from 70s, MNC also began shifting their attention and production operations process to low wage countries, especially China. The laborers of India were getting more than the laborers of China. That's why MNC turned their attention towards production process towards China during 70s. Here, we'll talk about China. Here in China, wages were very low. People got very little money after hard day's work. very low and became an attractive destination for multinational companies. Many multinational companies, they were attracted towards China because the cost of production or the wages of the laborers or workers were very industrial workers, their wages were very low. They were ready to work at the minimum wages. So it became an attractive destination for the MNCs. Now, the low cost of production, the cost of production is very low because the wages are low of the people. The low cost of production in China helped Chinese economy. China used to get the taxes from the MNCs and it helped their economy. It helped Chinese economy and the Chinese goods flooded the world market. Made in China, the product of China. It was produced in China and written made in China, but it was produced by multinational companies. So these cheap goods such as TV, mobile phones, toys, all kinds of articles, they flooded the world market at a very cheap. It's very cheap. So number 6, the relocation of industries. The relocation of industries by multinational companies. The relocation of industries in low-base countries stimulated world trade. It helped the world trade. More trade took place, and capital flow, money flowed from developed countries. They set up industries in developing countries and started producing mass production and flooded the world market with their cheap goods. So China, they are in the last portion, number 7. China, India and Brazil, they were developing countries at that time. China, India and Brazil have undergone rapid economic transformation, change, due to this globalization. This is called globalization. Investing, linking foreign countries' economy with the developing countries. Their economies were linked. This is called globalization. Due to globalization, China, India and Brazil, they have undergone rapid transformation, economic transformation. So it is due to this globalization. So making of a global world, we have come to the end part. So that's all for today. So you go through this, read the book properly. Since it is a very vast chapter, it took very long time to finish us. We could have finished it earlier, but it will be difficult for you to understand certain things. So that's all for today. We'll meet in the next class and we'll talk about other topics, other lessons, and study at home regularly. Make a habit of going through the online portal every time. It doesn't take long time, so you can do that and be wise enough to use your time, resources, and properly do reading at home. Reading is also very important since you don't have much practice. So that's all for today. We'll meet in the next class. Thank you for watching the video. That's all.